What is good, NIO family? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one, I'm going to be talking about the one and only NIO stock, what you should be looking after for the future. I'm also going to do something a little bit different from my typical videos because I've been talking about how NIO looks very bullish, but I want to do a more macro, in-depth analysis as to why I believe the market is likely going to continue to push. And then, with that said, with the market pushing, I do believe this will have an effect on NIO. So I want to actually break down this effect on NIO, why this can actually give NIO an extra boost when it comes to it pushing up even more. Now, before I break anything down about how SPY, the NASDAQ, the QQQs, and so on and so forth may affect NIO, I do have to mention a couple of things before starting. Firstly, I'm not a financial planner. Don't take any of this as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. Not only benefits me, it benefits the entire NIO community as a whole. And the last things, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link down below in its description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, you're guaranteed up to 12 free stocks, each worth up to $2,000. And the best part is any could be a free NIO share, a free Tesla share, or a mix of all of them. It's a limited time offer. The offer ends in just 2 days. Check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. Looking at NIO, this thing was up almost 12% for the day on Friday, and this thing's looking pretty strong. Now, if we look at NIO from a more macro perspective, or like a more broad perspective for NIO itself, you will notice something very interesting. On the daily chart, all right, I was noting something very important. If you guys watched my videos, I'm sure you guys remember, and I apologize about all these support and resistance levels. I keep them there just for reference. You don't even need to worry about them. I'm sure the chart is clear enough from here. But anyways, just look at the chart from right here, at least the last like 7-8 months. In fact, since the year started, NIO got rejected from this upper trend line. This is like a resistance level for NIO. We come down, we test support, come up, retest support, then it's resistance, come down a bit. We actually break above it temporarily in a fake out, then we have a big drop. And where does NIO bounce off of perfectly? Look at the line. It connects this one, and this one. Support is what NIO bounced off of. And when NIO does this, we do have a tendency of pushing up pretty hard. Now, I can't guarantee, though, that this push up is going to be like all the way up to this upper trend line and NIO is going all the way up to like $18 to $20. I can't guarantee that, guys, at least for the short term. For the long term, yes, I believe NIO will break those levels very easily. But for the short term, for the next like few weeks, next month or so, there were some moments where NIO pushed up like this and got a small rejection, right? And it is possible for something like this to happen. I'm not guaranteeing it will, but it is a possibility. I want to talk about why on earth we can actually see this possibility in SPY and NASDAQ and how this could affect NIO. So when it comes to SPY, obviously it looks bullish from the options chain perspective. We're just going to look at this perspective from the beginning because so many people were over leveraged on the put side. People are buying puts, thinking the market was going to crash. And what happened was the market makers helped the market pump up. And we could still see high put to call ratios, but we are seeing a lot of calls ending up in the money for Monday more than calls out of the money. And even though the put to call ratio isn't as bad for it, there is some gamma potential there. There's also potential for people to close their puts, and when they close their puts, what happens is they end up buying shares as a hedge. And when they buy those shares, it causes the market to start pumping up, right? The buying pressure comes in, and we are seeing it in real time. What else is interesting about NIO is if you compare NIO to like the QQQ, you will notice that the QQQ does tend to be correlated with NIO because these tech stocks tend to run in very similar manners. Look at how this was coming down. It pumped up a bit just like NIO. QQQ came down, went up just like NIO. They both came down together. They both went up together. They came down together, a little bit up. Instead, during this divergence right here, NIO was actually pumping while this was starting to drop. This started to push up a bit. NIO was holding. Then we saw the QQQ start to come down and NIO was coming down with it. The QQQ started to bounce and NIO just barely started to bounce. NIO was a little bit delayed right there, which is why the price per ratio came down. NIO was actually underperforming compared to SPY and also the QQQ, but NIO is now starting to catch up. Look at this, we're starting to get a bounce right here. NIO is catching up with the rest of the market. Good sign right there. If you look at NIO on the 5-minute, for example, all right, and what we could do is compare it to the QQQ. What do you notice? All right, it's pretty obvious that NIO is affected by the overall market. This is how the QQQ traded on Friday, starting right here. So from right here to here, this is just Friday. On NIO looked like this. So there is a comparison right here. You could see that NIO kind of, to some degree, NIO did outperform the QQQ because this thing was up like 12%. Notice how the QQQ pumps up. NIO was pumping up, but NIO got the big push into open. And then they both come down together here. Then the QQQ starts rallying. NIO starts to rally. The QQQ comes down. NIO comes down. Then we push up. NIO pushes up. So very similar trends right here. You could also compare NIO to like Tesla. They also tend to move very similarly. Tesla does tend to affect NIO too. If you look at the trend right here, big push into open, small drop, another big push, double top here, similar to this. We came down just like how NIO came down. Nice pop into the end of the day. Very similar trend. So I'm talking about this because the market affects how NIO moves. The SPY, look at SPY for example on the 5 minutes. This is what SPY looked like. The market didn't pump as hard into open the way NIO did, but then overall the trend was very similar, right? SPY had a big pump. NIO has the big pump. They both come down. They both come down. This one starts pumping, but NIO also pumped, but not as hard because NIO had resistance that slowed it down. NIO drops and pumps. SPY dropped and then pumped. And then we had a very similar trend, right? So, like I said, guys, the market does tend to run in very similar ways, and it does affect NIO. Now, with that said, I want to shift your focus onto SPY. When you look at SPY on the daily chart, you will notice something very interesting. The SPY has been respecting this descending broadening wedge since the start of the year. This is the bear market trend. We have resistance at this upper trend line. We have support at the lower trend line. Right here, what happened? We got rejected off the start. This is the resistance, support, midline, support, resistance, down, midline, followed by support, big pump to resistance, come down, nice bounce, and it looks like we're about to retest resistance right up here. So the SPY looks like it's going to hit 410 very soon, in my opinion. Depending on how long it takes, if it takes a little longer, then maybe it's going to be like 408 or so. But the bottom line is, I see this gap getting filled right here on SPY. I also see the market pumping. I also believe that it's very possible that this is going to cause the market to continue to push to the upside. Now, after that pretty decent earnings report that came out and some strong expectations from William Lee Bin, NIO started to pump up with it. But remember, guys, at this trend right here, this resistance level, SPY has a tendency of getting rejected. We got rejected off this thing like 3 times. All right. So even though the market may continue to pump and it looks really bullish, I'd be careful right here. Not saying we have to reject, it's just that historically we have strong resistance coming up, and we do have a tendency of actually maybe rejecting around this level. Now, if we do end up breaking above it, it would be very possible, and it could cause the market to just squeeze and start running very hard. But as of right now, I'm not confident about that, and I'd be very cautious about this resistance at 410 on SPY. On the QQQ, it's very similar. If you look at like Apple and other stocks, let me just show you guys Apple, for example, because you could interpret the stock a little bit differently. Apple does not have to run exactly how SPY does. In fact, this does tend to drag SPY up, but you'll notice that Apple is, in my opinion, if it breaks 150, this thing has potential to hit 155. Break past that, then we have potential to go all the way up to this 157 level. We got rejected off that previously. We do have kind of like a supply zone right here. So I'd be very careful on Apple there. But if we keep pumping, there's also another zone we got a big rejection. That's 163. There's also 170, right? Many zones where Apple got these big rejections. So you have to be very careful with how the market moves during these tests. Now, what this means for NIO is likely going to continue pumping with the market as the QQQ allows it to pump. And to me personally, I think NIO is going to outperform the market a little bit longer because we got a really nice bounce off this very broad looking channel that NIO has been kind of descending on. And I believe that NIO is going to likely continue pumping, but once the market hits those very key resistance zones, I'd be very careful with how I end up trading NIO because if the market reverses very hard, it could have a negative effect on how NIO ends up moving. So what else is worth noting is You could take kind of like a midline. I'm going to draw this like really fast, guys. It's not going to be perfect. I apologize about that. But just to make this quick, you could kind of draw like a midline like this, just like that. And the real question is, how is NIO going to respond to this? I do believe that NIO could actually like break above this and start pushing up. But I'm going to become very careful around this $15 level because previous support becomes resistance. And then the real question is, are we going to come down and retest this like midline area and then get a big bounce afterwards? I don't truly know, right? Nobody truly knows if it's going to happen that way, but I do believe that with NIO, I'm going to become very careful around this. First off, I'd be careful around 13. I'd also be very careful. We could go for a gap fill around like the 14, but I'd be very careful around that $15 range. I'd be very careful right there to see how the market responds and where the market is during that time frame. So the bottom line is, you don't just watch NIO when you trade NIO. All right, you have to watch the QQQ. You got to know what SPY is doing. At least have it in your mind, have it in the back of your mind. What on earth are these things doing? Is the market pumping? Is the market coming down? It will affect NIO to some degree. Because remember, NIO is not the only thing that pumped. The whole market started pumping, got a big reversal, and that really did dictate how NIO ended up moving, right? So with that said, please watch these things very carefully. Right now, NIO does look more bullish than bearish. We have more room to continue pumping. If you look at SPY, guys, we're not at 410 yet, which is where the key resistance is going to be. We're getting closer to it, but we're not there yet, which means we have more room to pump to the upside. And I believe this is going to help NIO pump past $12 to the 13s. We could even go as high as the 14s like super quickly. I think it's very possible. And I'd be very careful once we get close to like 15, guys. That's essentially what I have for this video. Anyways, thank you all for listening. I just wanted to give you guys this warning and talk about the importance of the macro perspectives. And with that out of the way, I'll most definitely see you guys in the next video. NIO to the moon because the long-term future is still incredibly bright. Enjoy your weekends, guys, and peace out.